In this book, Diplomacy, US diplomat Henry Kissinger wrote, almost as if according to some natural law, in every century, there seems to emerge a country with the power, the will, and the intellectual and moral impetus to shape the entire international system in accordance with its own values. In the 17th century, France under Cardinal Richelieu introduced a modern approach to international relations, based on the nation-state and motivated by national interest as its ultimate purpose. In the 18th century, Great Britain elaborated the concept of the balance of power, which dominated Europe diplomacy for the next 200 years. In the 19th century, Metternich's Austria reconstructed the concept of Europe and Bismarck's Germany dismantled it, reshaping European diplomacy into a cold-blooded game of power politics. In the 20th century, no country has influenced international relations as decisively and at the same time as ambivalently as the United States. No society has more firmly insisted on the admissibility of intervention in the domestic affairs of other states, or more passionately asserted that its own values were universally applicable. No nation has been more pragmatic in the day-to-day conduct of its diplomacy, or more ideological in the pursuit of its historic moral convictions. This is the story of how America rose, why its rise was unlike any other in history, and why that very uniqueness may also hold the seeds of its decline. Unlike the European empires that carved their way across the globe, America began not as a conqueror, but as the conquered. It was itself a colony, an outpost of Britain, and its birth was a rebellion against the empire. That origin story mattered. It gave the United States a self-image unlike Rome, unlike Spain, unlike Britain. America saw itself as a champion of freedom, not the enforcer of hierarchy. The founding fathers spoke of liberty, equality, and self-determination. Of course, the reality was more complicated. Slavery thrived, native peoples were dispossessed, and women were excluded from the promises of independence. Yet, the ideals carried weight, and in time, they gave America a moral vocabulary that no other empire could claim. Expansion came not overseas but across a continent. The 19th century was America's crucible. Manifest destiny drove settlers westward. Railroads stitched together vast plains, and the Civil War, the bloodiest conflict in US history, resolved the question of whether this republic could endure. By its end, the Union had not only survived, but had reforged into a centralized industrial power. Industry more than anything distinguished America. By the late 1800s, it was producing steel, coal, oil, and manufactured goods on a scale that dwarfed most of Europe. Immigrants poured in by the millions, swelling the labor force and fueling innovation. A continental empire had been built without the same colonial entanglements that weakened Europe. It was a paradox. America rejected the idea of empire, yet everything about its growth, its wealth, its expansion, its restless ambition prepared it for empire on a global scale. What makes America's story so striking is how little time it took. Spain had ruled the seas for more than a century. Britain's empire stretched over 200 years. Rome lasted for centuries, but America's climb from a regional republic to global power happened in less than a single lifetime. The turning point came in 1898 with the Spanish-American War. Almost overnight, the United States seized territories across the seas: Puerto Rico, Guam, the Philippines. A country that once swore it will not meddle in the old world's affairs suddenly had an overseas empire of its own. It was the moment America stepped onto the global stage. 2 decades later, when the world descended into the carnage of the First World War, America once again surprised everyone. Until 1917, the Allies were exhausted, broken by years of trench warfare. Then, America entered the war, with fresh troops, immense industrial power, and vast resources. The tide turned. The war ended. The world realized that without America, the balance of power could not be settled. By the 1920s, the United States was already the world's largest economy. His factories outproduced all of Europe combined. Jazz, cinema, skyscrapers radiated across the world. While Europe was rebuilding from the ruins of war, America was entering the Jazz Age, booming with wealth and confidence. Yet, just as quickly, the Great Depression reminded the world that America's rise was not invincible. Millions lost jobs, banks collapsed, breadlines stretched for blocks. For a moment it seemed the United States might falter, but in hindsight, the Depression was not America's undoing. Instead, it became the trial by fire that prepared it for the greater storm to come, World War II. In less than 50 years, America had gone from a continental republic to a global power. It was a meteoric rise, too fast for Europe to match, too immense for rivals to ignore, and the century of America was only beginning. For 2 centuries, Britain had been the sun around which the world revolved. Its empire spanned continents, its navy ruled the seas, and its pound sterling anchored global trade. But World War II changed everything. Britain fought bravely, but it bled itself dry. By 1945, London was bombed. Its treasury was empty, and its empire was slipping through its fingers. Into that vacuum stepped the United States. America had entered the war later, but it emerged richer, stronger, untouched at home. Its factories had armed not only its own soldiers, but those of its allies. Its scientists had built the atomic bomb. Its economy was half the world's output. In the ashes of Europe, America was suddenly the center of gravity. The British pound gave way to the dollar. At Bretton Woods in 1944, it was America's currency, backed by its gold reserves, that became the foundation of the new global financial order. The Marshall Plan soon followed, pumping billions into Europe's recovery, binding nations to Washington's leadership. But the United States did not replace Britain by copying it. It did not build a sprawling colonial empire. Instead, it created a network of bases, alliances, and markets. It ruled less by direct conquest and more by economic might, technological innovation, and cultural influence. Britain's empire had been painted red on maps. America's empire was invincible, embedded in finance, trade, media, and military presence. By 1950, the balance was undeniable. The empire where the sun never set had been eclipsed by a younger empire with brighter light. And unlike Britain, whose power grew gradually over centuries, America's dominance seemed to come all at once, sudden, absolute, and overwhelming. What made America's rise truly unique was that it did not rely solely on armies or fleets. It ruled through the ideas. From the beginning, the United States cast itself not as an empire, but as a liberator, the defender of freedom, democracy, and prosperity. This was the paradox that set America apart. No other empire claimed so loudly that it was not an empire, yet no empire ever commanded such global reach. Where Britain had colonies, America had allies. Where Rome imposed tribute, America extended loans. Where others demanded obedience, America promised opportunity. Its cultural influence was unmatched. Hollywood films, jazz, and later rock and roll carried American confidence into every corner of the world. The image of the American dream, that anyone could succeed with hard work, became a global aspiration. Even in places where America was distrusted, its culture was consumed. Science and innovation added to its moral edge. The Manhattan Project had produced the bomb that ended World War II. Soon after, the space race showcased America's ability to turn imagination into reality. Its universities attracted the brightest minds. Its corporations became global icons. Innovation itself became part of American identity. But beyond culture and science, there was ideology. America claimed that its values, democracy, free markets, individual rights, were universal. It insisted that these were not simply national preferences, but moral truths. That claim gave its foreign policy a sense of mission, one that could inspire allies but also justify interventions. No empire before had wrapped power so completely in the language of morality. This intellectual and moral edge gave the United States a legitimacy that Rome never had. Spain never cared for, and Britain never mastered. It made America's dominance feel less like domination and more like destiny. The Cold War was the stage on which America's empire was fully revealed. The collapse of Nazi Germany and Imperial Japan left two giants standing, the United States and the Soviet Union. For the first time in history, power was concentrated in two opposing poles, and America became the anchor of the so-called free world. Its strategy was not to build colonies, but to build alliances. NATO in Europe, Seattle in Asia, security treaties stretching from Japan to South Korea to the Middle East. At its peak, America's soldiers, ships, and bases encircled the globe. But unlike traditional empires, America's dominance was multidimensional. Its economic power was unmatched. By 1950, it produced nearly half of the world's goods. Its currency was the backbone of global trade. Its corporations, Ford, General Motors, IBM, Coca-Cola, were household names everywhere. Its culture, from Hollywood to jazz to Levi's jeans, was as influential as its armies. The Cold War gave America a moral role as well. It framed itself as the defender of freedom against communism, the guarantor of democracy against tyranny. The narrative was powerful, especially in Western Europe, where American aid rebuilt devastated nations and offered stability. The Marshall Plan wasn't just dollars, it was ideology dressed as generosity. And America invested in science as an arm of empire. The space race was not simply about rockets, it was about proving which system could master the future. When Neil Armstrong walked on the moon in 1969, it was more than a technological triumph. It was the declaration that America, not the Soviet Union, defined human progress. In 1991, the Soviet collapse left the United States standing alone. For a brief moment, it was the world's sole superpower, the unchallenged center of a unipolar world. Never before had an empire achieved such dominance in so many dimensions at once. America's military, economy, culture, and ideas were not just powerful, they were global. This was the high tide of the American century. For Britain, the empire reached its height over 200 years. But for the United States, the age of unquestioned dominance was strikingly brief. From the end of World War II in 1945 to the collapse of the Soviet Union in 1991, America stood unrivaled, 50 years in which it rose higher, faster, and more completely than any empire before it. It was an empire of paradoxes, born in rebellion against empire. It became the greatest empire the world had ever seen. It claimed non-intervention, yet intervened everywhere. It preached freedom, yet sustained dictatorships when convenient. It rejected colonialism, yet ringed the world with bases. And yet, because of its wealth, its culture, and its ideals, much of the world accepted American leadership. But history is never static. The very forces that made America so powerful, its global reach, its financial dominance, its ideological certainty, also made it fragile. Rivals emerged, debts grew, divisions deepened. As quickly as it rose, America now faces the question that has haunted every empire before it. How long can supremacy last? Kissinger once wrote that every century crowns its power. In the 20th century, that power was America, but the 21st is now unfolding, and the signs suggest that the American century may already be giving way. The rise of the United States was meteoric, unmatched in speed and scale, but perhaps, like all meteors, its brilliance was destined to fade just as fast. That fall, that decline, is the subject of this channel. Every empire that rises eventually begins to fade, and America is no different. The signs are all around us, in depth and division, in overstretch and uncertainty, in the quiet shifting of power toward other parts of the world. Yet, few can see it clearly. This channel exists to make the invisible visible, to take the scattered events of our age and piece them into a larger story. The story of an empire at its twilight. For Americans, it is not a call to despair, but a chance to confront reality, to recognize the cracks before they become collapse, and perhaps to save what can be saved. For those outside America, it is an opportunity to learn the lessons of empire, to understand how great power rise, how they rule, and how they fall, so that your nations may chart a different course. The rise of the United States was unlike any in history. Sudden, brilliant, transformative. But history is not finished with America. The question now is whether its decline will be just as swift, just as decisive, and just as world-shaping. Here, in these files, we will open the record. We will study the empire as it was, and as it unravels before our eyes. Because the story of America's decline is not only about America, it is about the world that will emerge after it.